OptixEQ. Again, continuing on our discussion with OpitxPLOT 2020 and race 4, Wednesday at Del Mar, August the 14th. We're going to focus in. There's a little bit of a different view you see in front of you of the plot. I just kind of changed the window size, and you can do lots of things in terms of how you want your view to look here. So I just kind of shrunk the overall width of the screen and try to focus in on those sliding bars on the top right. So now they're going to be on the top for us. And they're just handicapping categories. You'll see them as I put them up. There's class earnings, ROI, class competition, horse record, and trainer jockey, and quad percentage. I'm going to focus on a couple here. The first is speed figures, which is the default. Again, we talked about this a little bit in the basics video. North is good, south is bad. Essentially what we're doing is comparing the horses' speed figures over a number of different speed figure categories. You see all the categories down here: speed, best distance, speed, best surface, speed, best surface and distance. So you can play if you want to look at any particular category, but this just gives you a general feel for the horse's speed figure ability or capability in recent racing. Again, sometimes you look at speed figures and the horse might have just run their best speed figures, so you got to keep that in mind. But this just gives a general sense of ability, and what I'm really looking for here are there just some horses that are just too slow. And the two that pop out at me is the number 2 and the number 7. They kind of pop out at me in terms of just looking slow compared to the other horses. It looks like the 3 and the 4 have the best speed figures recently, but the other horses, to me, pass in terms of speed figures. I mean, the 1 looks a little light, but the others look fine in terms of speed figures. They're just not completely negative. And again, what I look at, this is part of it, but I'm also going to look at form and see which horses may be cycling to the best speed figure. But I think this gives you a general indication of maybe which horses are too slow, which horses kind of dominate on speed figures. And I think it's a great tool to quickly do that and not have to kind of look at each horse's speed figures and turn pages and compare them and all the rest. So that's one category. The other category I want to look at is class competition. Now, what we did is we used purse. I know people will be like, you can't just measure class by purse. But what I found out is that it just seems, with my studying, looking at this, it seems like the whole casino effect and purse structures have kind of normalized. I mean, everyone's got their casino built and doing their things, and casino money coming in, coming out, whatever. And I think it's kind of normalized, and I think people in barns, especially in kind of the middle of part of the country, maybe not so much on the West Coast, but West Coast is a whole other story because no one moves from track to track. They kind of stay there anyway. So it just seems like the middle of the country, people do go and ship where the money is. So I just think this is a pretty good indication. I've been using it for like a year now, and I've found that it works pretty good. I'm thinking about introducing, probably maybe with the help of our BrizNet relationship, the Briz race ratings, or they seem to be pretty good, and I know a lot of people used to those. So that's another consideration. But for now, I think again this gives you a good indication maybe which horses have a class edge or disadvantage. And again, what this does is it looks at the purses of these recent races or average of races, the last 3 races, and compares it to the other horses, which is what we're trying to do. And so you can see where horses might be at a disadvantage. The 5 kind of pops out as a horse that, from a class perspective, looks up against it versus the rest of the field. 7 looks fine. The 10 looks a little light. The 9 looks pretty good. So again, it just gives you an indication from a class perspective, which horses might have an edge and which horses might be disadvantaged. If you want to just focus on maybe the last race, sometimes I look at that just to see if a horse is going up or down relative. Again, it's not going up and down to today's class level. It's relative to the other horses in the race, which is a really cool thing. I know I kind of stress it a lot. It's a very cool thing. So it looks like the 4 is coming down versus the other horses, while the 3 and the 5 and the 10 are going up. Okay, and I think those are horses that just broke their maiden, so that makes a lot of sense. So I think this is really another cool, powerful tool and angle to look at while you're handicapping. So keep that in mind. And then another one, obviously, is the quad percentage, and there's some confusion out there maybe on this too, so I just want to go through it again. What we do is we look at the horse's position in both the standard plot, as you see below there, and the surface distance plot. See where the horse plots in terms of quadrant and shape. And we take that into consideration against the track profile. So for instance, let's look at the number one. The number one plots in quadrant 2 on both. He's a square in quadrant 2. So the reason he ranks so high is because at Del Mar, horses who plot on the turf going a long distance in quadrant 2 do better than other horses. So comparatively to the rest of the horses in the field, the win percentage, like right here, for standard and surface and distance must be high at Del Mar for Q2 squares. And this is in the exacta for standard, in the exacta for surface and distance, in the money percentage for standard, and then in the money percentage for surface and distance. And that's what we plot. So again, it looks like the 1, and the 3 have an advantage in this perspective versus the 7 looks disadvantaged. Again, the others and the 2, so 2 and 7 look, 2, 7, and 10 kind of look rough. 1 and 3 look pretty good. The others are kind of neutral. Again, in handicapping, we're just trying to make, looking for an edge somewhere, looking for maybe a horse that's maybe getting overplayed that might show up here as a negative, and that's kind of what we do. I think handicapping is more about eliminating horses than actually picking horses. That's kind of the way to do it, and then just kind of back into the odds later. So that's another way of using these sliding bar graphs to get some information. We have others on trainer, jockey. There's going to be updates to this one. We're going to look for some other things, but just gives you an idea about one of the things I like to do at some of these boutique meets is I'll hide, that just hides all the other noise. And I'll look at a trainer at the current meet, how he's doing. So I'm more of a cycle guy when it comes to trainer than a lot of these detailed statistics and so forth. I'm just looking whose barn is running at a particular time at the meet or what have you. And I think you'll see in our next iteration of this with trainers and jockeys, that's where our focus is going to be. We're going to have some scoring for last 10, 30, 60 days, and I think that'll be a good addition to this. And then, just a horse record. You can look at the horse surface and distance, whatever, win percentages. So there's lots you can do here. If, you're looking for a particular specialist, maybe, again, I'm going to hide everything and look for a horse, maybe track win percentage, see that something may pop. Okay, in this case, I think these are just horses lightly raced. So you got to be, careful with some of this when you're looking at it, but that's typical, right? So I think that's kind of the sliding bar graphs, pretty powerful. And I guess, again, the emphasis is that it's a comparative tool, which is very important. It's a little hard to get used to the concept, but once you do, I think you'll see the value in it, okay? The next we'll talk about is the table and the form cycles in the next segment.